So what we're going to do is try to lay the groundwork in part one and then get to the story in part two. The headline of the story is Chaim's Compote. So obviously, what does this mean? What this means is that there is a controversy which has come down to a question of the historical record on what the Chofetz Shita is on the eating of very common food, which everyone on this Zoom call, certainly, since we're all of a certain age, everyone in the room either has or still does eat. We do. Called Compote, got slightly gone out of fashion. No?
Yeah.
Not true? Slightly gone out of fashion in today's day and age, right? Slightly gone out of fashion, but I will still eat Compote. Compote consists of cooked pay rice mivushalim. And the question is, what is the halacha of Compote? Benegea to a bracha, very important issue. Obviously, it has hashlachos to other similar foods too, but the mystery, the intrigue here is that there seems to have been a question in the historical record of what the Chofetz Shita here is, since our Rebbe in Holy Yonim of our Chaim is Rabbeinu Ha-Mishnah Brura, and everything that we learned in our Chaim follows from the Piskei of the Mishnah Brura. All the Chuvais Svara written in the 100 years now since the publication, 100 plus, of the Mishnah Brura, are more or less soivev around the Mishnah Brura. Even the Chazon Ish, who is the most independent thinker of the last dayar, quotes the Mishnah Brura frequently in Hilchos and everywhere of all of our Chaim in a way which he does not quote other Achrayim. So what the Chofetz Chaim held about a specific thing is indeed extremely important, and especially a food as common, as important, still is prevalent. I mean, we eat Compote. It's not as much as we used to. Fancy catered events today, as I said, Compote is out of fashion. This is not the same shaila necessarily as the fruit cup shaila, which I thought I can cram into this year. Maybe I'll just mention it because it came up and we have to discuss that too. Then that's the fruit cup at the beginning of the Seudah. There's a major difference between a fruit cup served at the beginning of a Seudah, both halachically and also practically. The practical difference is what? Oh yes, what's the practical difference? What's the practical difference between a fruit cup and a compote?
One is raw and one is cooked.
One is called pay rice. What's the halachic term? We don't talk English here. We're European. What's the halachic term? One is pay rice, Chaim, and the other one is pay rice mivushalim. So there is a mitzias difference, and this mitzias difference has major shlachos in halacha. So I'll see if I can get to the compote. If not, we'll at the fruit cup. If not, we'll do the fruit cup in the course of the week. Because that's very important. I mean, even though that's also coming out of fashion, but they do serve fruit cups. It's very amusing to see how society has gotten richer. Because if you look in the Eretz Yisrael Dika Sfarim, you look at the Sfarim written in the 60s, fruit cups were considered to be a very rich thing to do. Because, it used to be a fancy suit, had a piece of gefilte fish, right? Fruit cups much more expensive. Now, who serves fruit cups and fancy things, right? I mean, all sorts of other things are served. So you can see the changing of the economic status of Klal Yisrael unfold over the last several generations, and it's reflected, of course, in the nature or quality of food. Now, this is the general statement, so you should listen to this. It's the general statement. The challenge and the interesting part of Hilchos Brachos is that unlike Himat, most other Mektzais b'halacha, where we don't mityaches with changing mores that much, that's not true in Hilchos Brachos. In other places, if you're going to change a psak of a Magen of Ram by saying in Hilchos Shabbos, by saying it's not negay today because things have changed, doesn't usually work, or the Poskim say that with great trepidation. I have found They have no such trepidation in Hilchais Brachas. Because, and I'll repeat this again, I think in the second shir, in case other people come on, because the understanding is that things do change in Hilchos Brachas. Hilchos Brachas is a combination of subjective and objective. On one hand, it's objective because Batla Daitai applies. On the other hand, there are numerous cases, as we already had numerous times, where a person's preference in foods make a difference in all sorts of things, how you eat it, what order you eat it, kadima, maker and tuffle, and al kulam, the paiskim. I can show this to you in many places. The paiskim today with AI, I can just speak nicely to my computer. I have to find the yeshiva AI. We'll come back and say, of course, we'll look for you for all the places where the Truvas Svarim say, this case today that we'll discuss after 12 o'clock is a prime example, possibly, of maybe Nishtanu Hadairais and therefore Nishtanu Hametzias. Let's go through the basics first, and then, as I said, we'll go through this mysterious business with the alleged steer in the Chofetz Chaim afterwards. So I'm going to go through the Shitais quickly of the Rishonim in Dvarim Habayim B'Teicha Suda, and then I am going to tie it to the issue. So the Gemara said, and I'm going to do this really fast because we did this all up last week. Amar Papa the Maskana is Dvarim Habayim Machmas Suda does not require a bracha. Dvarim Habayim Shalei Machmas Suda B'Teicha Suda Tunin Bracha Lefaneim Lein Achrayim. And this is the basic psak in Gemara. There are 5 shitais in the Rishonim, 5, maybe more sub-shitais. There are 5 shitas in the Rishonim. How to define Dvarim B'Teicha Suda? Shitas Rashi. The pshat is that Baim Lafes is a pas, and they are pater midin ikar v'tafel because they are havalei tefela. Dvarim Habayim Shalei Machmas Suda require a bracha. An example of that says Rashi is daisa, and Dvarim Habayim Elisaida. The real guts of the meal, that requires no bracha. Ask the Rishonim 4 kashas and Rashi. The first one is what's the chiddush and ikar and tuffle, and the Achronim struggle to answer the kashas and Rashi, which is what we did last week. Shitas hataisvis. Taisvis follows Rashi to a certain extent. That there is the Torah of the brachas midin, that the lefes, the Dvarim Habayim Teicha Suda is midin lefes, and the operating language is kalaymer haragila lavay machmas asuda apas sharagilam leichlan in a pas. That's a lesson of the Taisis that we saw last week several times. Taisis, however, takes Rashi to decide it's marchavit to include cases where you eat it. Varm Shabam Malafes, even without the pas together. According to Rashi, L'chayr should have to eat it together because it's ikar and tuffle. And that's the way Chazal ate food in their kufa. And here's an example. In order to incorporate the changing methodology of Achila, Taisis had to expand it beyond Rashi's pshat. And anything is, even if it's as a boiled lafes, the pas doesn't actually have to be a dip. Doesn't have to be a sandwich. It could be something that's eaten together with the pas. That's shitas a shitas a rush. As you remember, is the lashon the Rush uses is Dvarim Habayim Machmas Asud is basar v'dagim v'yerek v'daisa she'ergim l'kavaya ikar hasud aleim. The Rush repeats it again. Given the ikar hasud aleim. And Chaim pas ikar hasuda v'hamashkin aleim. That's shita number 3. Shita number 4, the shita a Rajba. On one hand, he also like Rashi. The Rajba explains Rapapas. He cited Dvarim Habayim Machmas Asuda v'Dvarim Hamalafsim. But the Rajba adds one phrase: Basar v'dagim ki yaitzabai ain't it in a bracha. Basar v'dagim not require bracha. Dehin ba'atzman mazlin ve'ein ba'al keduch hasuda l'azbiyah. This is the Hazbiyah, the Mazbiyah. Let's call the Rajba the Mazbiyah, and pas patters anything that's bo Muslim Lazbiyah. These are the 4 major sheets of Rishonim, and then Al Kulam Shitas Rambam doesn't mention that Rashi, the Bam Olafes, doesn't mention the Rush and Bam Ikra Suda. Mashma from the Rambam, he learns Pshutai, anything that comes B'derech Klal in a Suda, that's Tafel Pas, and it's Nifta with Brech Pas. But anything that's Regila Lecha Shlei Machma Suda, which means you eat it all day, Paris, you eat all day, they're not considered to be Shaykh Suda, and you make a sacred brach. Ben Yaina has a Shita, which could be the sixth Shita, or maybe it's the fifth Shita, maybe it's like the Rambam. The Ben Yaina, we'll see the Ben Yaina inside because it's key to the understanding of mystery number 2, which I will unfold in a moment. But according to all, let's just tell you what the Ben Yaina says. Ben Yaina says, the ger is Dvar Mabam Machs the Suda Shagil Lechem B'Teicha Suda. And Leimach B'Suda, if you eat it all day, Lav Dafka B'Suda. Okay. So I was like, Lamagash I saw somebody migrate this way. That boy Mach B'Suda is not a simon, it's a siba. Because they're boy and regilim to eat them in the Suda, they're shaykh to the Suda, they're tuffle to the Suda, whether it's a classical ikran tuffle or a unique ikran tuffle, and therefore they do not need a bracha. Lisikum. There are 4 shitas ikariyais in the Yisayid of Torah, Dvarma, Boy, Metach, Misasuda, and I'm going to rattle them off quickly. Dvarma, Lafstim, Misapas, shitas Rashi. Dvarma, Bam, Ikra Suda, Tfam, Pas, which is Roish Lasuda. That's shitas Rush. Dvarma, Mazin, Mechlon, Berchas, Pas. That is shitas Harajba, Mazin, Mazbia, and the 5th is shitas Rambam. Macholim should darken lias necholim suda nechlol tfan lepas, and if it's darker lechel outside of the suda like Paris, not nechlol pas. These are the 4 or maybe 5 shitas in the Rishonim, and I hope this sikum was useful. We also had an important suffix in the Magen Avram with mistapik. We ate a little bit of psak pas. You were not koveya. Is this berchas pas pater the yesum macholim? And this is a machlekes in the Achreinim. Many are chelik in the Magen Avram, and as we heard last week, part of the lumdus here, Rabbi Dinsky laid it out beautifully. The other Achreinim laid it out, other contemporaries laid it out. Maybe this machlekes between the Magen Avram and those who are chelik in Maram or Shulchan and others depends on how you understand which are the shitas the Rishonim that you need, which is what we discussed last week. Adkan, a review of the shitas the Rishonim, the sugya. Now let's go to see some of the sources inside. Now, in addition to the Tmiyah that will be upcoming about what the shita of Rabbeinu Chofetz Chaim is, and we're going to see the visible part of the Chofetz Chaim because the rest of it is B'Piyush Shmuel. I was Zeichet, you'll hear in the second part to hear a psak from as closely as you can get to Kli Rishon of this. No, I didn't talk to someone who was at the Chofetz Chaim's table, but pretty close. I could have actually. And an uncle, his name was Rav Gershon Yankelevich. He was nifted at the age of 106, I think, Zakim Muflag. And he was in the house of the Chofetz Chaim as a young bacher. He lived 106. The Chofetz Chaim gave him a bracha, and the Nunzer Mishpacha, the bracha and Riches Yamim. I don't remember what specifically bracha and Riches Yamim, but they would tell it Riches Yamim and the bracha of the Chofetz Chaim. I don't know if he actually was there during the Compote Suda. For that, you have to go back one day, if he was the young boy, a young bacher. But there are people who I knew who remember the Chofetz Chaim. But this one gets a lot more complicated because of all the conflicting issues. The other great Gadol B'Yisrael, whose shita is problematical here, is Rabbeinu Baal Mincha Shleima. Malcham Mincha Shleima, of course, is one of the Shmeitzes and all of learning. And for some reason, the shita of Rabbi Zalman is very problematical. Very problematical. For that, we are going to have to do 2 things. We are going to see the Mincha Shleima inside, We're going to see how people are tzarech mind on this Mincha Shleima. We're going to see the Chofetz Chaim inside, and we'll see the historical record which follows Chofetz Chaim. Let's start with the Mishnah Berurah for obvious reasons. So the Mishnah Berurah in Siman Kuf Ayin Zayin. So I asked our people to put it all together, so you don't have to fool around that much with the book. So let's do that. Let's go to the. Let's go to the for Pesach. Let's go to our master file that was sent us by Rabbi Hafkat. He reprinted the Mishnah Berurah for our ease of reference. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'hakoil nihiyeh b'dvarai.
Amen.
Got to wish you all a good Chodesh. Am I talking to anybody? Anybody hear me?
Yeah, it's quite a Rabbi.
Hello?
You're good.
No, I know that. I'm just talking. I'm asking if I'm talking to anybody on the screen sharing issue.
Yeah, oh,
Here we go. That's the answer. I'm Rabbi Isa. Let's go to the Mishnah Berurah first, page 1. I made him take off all the adjectives. I do have a smicha sign. Okay, says the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah in Sivkat and Daled. Mishnah Berurah glossing the Mechaber, which talks about, as you all know by now, you better know by now, that ta'inim and fruits b'teicha suda need another bracha. Said the Mishnah Berurah, "Chen kol davar sheba rakul kinuach v'leila hasbiyah." It's a stick long Mishnah Berurah, so we'll do it as best as we can. All things that are commonly kinuach. Anybody have a good English word for kinuach? Yaakov? Do you have a printout there of this thing? What's kinuach? Anybody have an English word? I'm going to go to my Israelis for the English word. No. Last week I got another one. I think I shared it with you guys. I asked one of my Israeli friends how you say random in Hebrew. Random. So I guess kinuach I can't because this is a Hebrew word. Everybody knows what kinuach is. Kinuach soda. Okay. Right. There's a fancy English word for it, obviously. I just don't know what it is. Okay. Chol davar shebarak kinuach v'leila hasbiyah, including Paris. V'hilu hey mivushalim, they're cooked. Gam kein ena pas trust you need a separate bracha. So this is the Compote halacha, Rabbi say. Pas doesn't patra. Why? Given she'ain shaykh lepas achronim. Who's he quoting? Achronim. So who are these achronim? So we'll see the Shartzin in a moment. Bafilu im bishla Paris. Usually the Ram is quoting. The Ram is quoting. The Graz. Bafilu im bishla Paris and basar. What a chiddush! Even if you, as people sometimes do, they made a meat stew with apricots in it. Mash b'kam achronim l'sarach levarach aleim. How could that be? If you made a stew with apricots in it, you need to make a bari pri eitz on the apricot. Abalei state. The Aina Paris Nasan Fein Labasa. Why not? It's not like the Chayodam, Shakasav, that Paris Fein Labasa, which is a Svara Moed Mistaber. You make a stew, and maybe I'm giving you the wrong Matthias, as we already said a moment ago. You change the Matthias, you change the Psak Halacha. But this seems to be a strange halacha. Chayodam seems to be 100% right. You take a stew and you cook it with apricots in it. To make a bracha, eitz on the apricot.
You can take the Paris out, you eat it separate. Maybe so. We make
Maybe you do. Fine. Let's say you do. So he says only if you take them out separate. Verse doesn't say that, but let's say you do.
that would fit that.
Still, you think it's buttled to the busser, no?
No, because you take it out, you're eating it separate. You want to be able to.
Why are you cooking it with the busser? You're trying to make yourself flagix?
Taste the buster and then Paris.
So we learned in the last sugya. We learned in the last sugyas that busser is very powerful, right? And busser controls even over Jaime the Dagon. So how could it not control over a pre?
you don't make a dam on the carrots and the potatoes.
Right, potatoes, you do potatoes, you make a pot on potatoes, you take it out, pardon me, meat course.
So you're being massive to my kasha. This is the Chayodam's svara. Loy Kadas Chayot, Shekasa that Paris trailing I was. Acham Sevi Aktanis Matsash beside Gam Ken Lemar, the Loy Varech Ella weiter. Oh, the cost of Tamachar was there. And this is focusing on this weird, no, I shouldn't say weird, this outlier case of the apricot stew. And this is not an outlier case. I take that back because that's what simis is. This is what apple simis is. I think that's apricot shakar baron.
No, I got some pears.
Pears?
Yeah.
Okay. Pears, sorry. Near Shakal Ikran Haim Bain Lamazin Lasuda. Layla Kinoch Ba'alma. They're part of the said Yaktana, they're part of the stew. Of Teres Tap. Where are you going? Where are you going? Yaktana. Ella B'Tairas. B'Lev Kinoch El B'Teres Tap. Kashar Tapin Shanasim B'Lef is V'Yerik. Shein Tzarech Lavar Tamzeh. So he agrees with the Chayadam. But for a different reason, he says it's similar. It's Iker Suda. Again, Rabbi said obviously the story is Iker Suda, you don't make a bracha, and the something else you make a bracha. We need to find something else. So Messiah, the let's say today Suffolk, Kesharoitz Lechol Tzimis, the Paris Muvashalim. Yikal Tchila is a prichai. You want to eat at Tzimis, Paris Muvashalim, or Compote, which is what that is. You're required to take a pre-chai. You make a bracha on the pear, and then patters the compote. The mainly pre-chai yechol tefillah v'seif mapas. So these two sentences here raise major operating problems. There's island nizar to take a pre-chai, but they state is the island nizar to eat pas with it, and if you are, what does it mean that you eat pas with it? Does that mean that you have to have pas with every bite? Yes, there are places who say that. Does it mean that you have to have a pas in your mouth while the compote is being eaten? That takes away, obviously, the geschmackheit of the compote. You're going to have to start worrying about having pas in your mouth all along the time, but that's very possible. So now the Mishnah gives you the zinger here. Even if you're going to go with the Svardi Aktana, that's potter because it's bol mazain, because it was cooked with the basar, or it's part of the stew. You do take it out, you don't take it out, doesn't matter. However, compote, aim, bol mazain, it must be a French word, compote. I imagine has an E at the end, so it must be a French word. Where does it come from? Snyder. You think it's French or you think it's German? Ein bala Muslim klal rak lekinuach suda v'tzarech bracha. So Mr. Pura Paskins, Rabbi Sai, please listen carefully. This is the main.
It's interesting. It's old French from the same word as compost, the mixture.
Really?
Yeah.
Makes sense. Compost just means a mixture, right?
Yeah, like
A mixture of cement and stuff like that, right?
or your old vegetable peels from your garden.
So yeah, right. Vegetable garden. So it's a mixture of stuff, whatever it's being mixed in there. So it's a mixture. Because compote was a mixture of sugar and Paris and Dvash. You saw all that stuff that they put in there. Zak the Sharet Siyan, nice sign. Said the Sharet Siyan. He wasn't happy with this. He had to add to this the Sharet Siyan. What's the problem here, Rabbi said? Listen carefully because this is going to come up again. Mishabur is bothered that what? What's he bothered here? Tarkov.
You just dessert.
No. Mishabur told you just said you have to make a bracha. The af means even though. So therefore he's telling you, you don't have to make a bracha. Why don't you have to make a bracha? Because it's in every Suda Libasayf. Down came Mistavra, so therefore that should somehow become a tour. Doesn't matter. Lechayer, Lechashid, Gvarma, Boy, Machma Suda is not called Machsud, is not a real part of the Suda. Every single chasana in Radin was
Yeah, but it's always as dessert, never during
had compote.
Basof.
Yeah, so nevertheless, Kieran talk upon a rock, Nochim by last, then Gal Muslim Seva, it brings rice from Rishonim. You need a bracha. What about the carrot simis? I don't know. In those days, on Shabbos before the benching, they used to bring carrot strudel or whatever. Not strudel, carrot. Marin is carrots, right?
Yeah.
That's you're basically saying this. They used to have some sort of a carrot thing. The gamsham ain't there by the pas, not a part of the suda. It's compotish, it's sweet dessert. That's walking in between the raindrops here. He says, you bring a plate of carrots at the end of the Suda, that you do not have to make a bracha because somehow it's part of the Suda. It's similar to Daisa. Why? Because the person is not eating it for dessert. Everybody knows that the test case on the ground is what's a dessert and what's not a dessert. So the operating test on the ground is you eat it even if you're fully satisfied. You ate enough. In most cases, you go to a chasna or whatever, you overate. They bring you the dessert. 99% of people, in my experience, will eat the dessert, including us, I guess, even if you're fully full. So what does that mean, Rabbi say? The dessert is not coming for achila. What's the dessert coming for? The aforementioned quinoa. But the carrots, the marin is being eaten as soiva, you're not yet full. Masha'en came with Paris, Shabbat, Tamid, Rak, Quinoa, Alma. Paris are not Muslim. The marin could be Muslim.
It almost sounds like the marin was, everybody had marin, so that was part of the Suda, even though it wasn't part of the Suda. The deep part of the Suda.
I guess what that means, what you're trying to say, that wasn't served at the same time as the meat.
Right, but fruit was a new thing, and the time of the first time it wasn't, even though you said it was part of the.
What do you mean was a new thing?
Wasn't as popular as marin.
So Yaakov is saying that we're dealing now with culinary history. That the Chofetz Chaim is writing the way he is, and Chofetz Chaim is saying that Compote is needs a bracha because it was a relatively new advance in culinary history, and it was clearly not part of the Suda because they didn't have it until then for whatever reason. I don't know. Maybe this is one of those Shiru. They got richer, so they had more access to Paris. The apples seem to have been around all the time, but applesauce is the most prevalent compote, right? Anyway, so you're telling me this is a new thing. Normally I would say very nice svara, but you have no proof of that, but it could be you're right. Because when we get to part 2.5 hours, when we try to unlock the mystery here with the Chofetz Chaim, the history of culinary stuff is actually going to become important. The name is derived from the Latin word compostus, meaning mixture. In late medieval England, blah, 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 blah. Okay? Whatever. Let's see what it says. In late medieval England, it was served at the beginning of the last course of a feast. Beginning of the last course. Sometimes the second or 3 courses, often accompanied by a creamy pottage. In the Renaissance, it was served chilled at the end of the. So you see, even for this shtickle Wikipedia, that things changed over time, and we know that. Le'harei in Suda in Chazal's time, that Arei Suda in medieval times, in Renaissance times. Renaissance is after the medieval, yeah. So, Harei modern Sudas, things change all the time. My favorite story is with Rabbi Auerbach, the Zunch. I actually have psak with him floating around here somewhere to explain his father's psak. And when I went in to show him what sushis are and what wraps are, and I explained to him they eat it at smorgasbord, it took me a few minutes to realize that he had no idea that there's a vast amount of foods, quantities of food are consumed in American weddings before the main Suda. Because even though that's now crept into Israel too, still not all that prevalent, and it's considered to be an American wedding if you serve an extensive smorgasbord. And part of it is obviously cultural because Israel is still heavily, I know certainly in the terror world, people eat the main Suda for lunch. You're not so hungry. So, what you're missing? You're missing the little supper, yogurt, mitados for supper, so you can survive till you get the Suda at night, and then you eat 2 Sudas in a day. But in America, where main Suda is at night, and therefore people come home and they're starving, so you got to give them a full Suda at the smorgasbord. And this is how culinary. I won't tell you the story of stuff you already know because it shows you how the mores of society changed to culinary structure of meals and has a shlachas, as you can see in Hilchei Suda. Okay, weiter. Im Oisin mehem tafim shakar and simis. Efshir shedem l'tafim nasam lefshir shakar merin. So who knows? Maybe it's let me do bug gam ken lemoslev l'kinuach v'emtim mashik sam sheim adpan. He sends it back to that time. So Mishra goes dances around here in this shared scene. Because basically what he's telling is, and we said this last week, there's 2 types of apple stuff. There's apple tzimmis. Sometimes apple tzimmis can be eaten as part of the course of the meal, and then it's butter. Sometimes it's eaten as dessert. Same food can have 2 brachos on it, and I think I said this last week, that while it's eaten as part of a course as a side dish, it's butter. Eat it as a dessert. The kinuach chayev could be the same thing, same apples, same basic ingredients, and nevertheless, Adkan, psak of Mishabura, both in the Mishabura and the Sharatzian, that the bracha that you're mechuyev to make a bayre peria eitz on apple compote unambiguous. A lot of interesting information got loaded in here, by Adams and others, but this is the basic psak backed up. The Mishabura is not alone. The Chazanish. In the Dinim and Hagos, you see right down here, the Chazanish, the people who wrote the Dinim and Hagos, Chazanish said, Chazanish's minig was to make a bracha on compote. To make a bracha on compote. The Stipler backs this up. In the Archas Rabbeinu, I'm going to leave the parentheses out for the moment, just do the first line. My Rabbi, that's a Stipler, Mavarach Beir Preetzel Compote, the Pucha Eit Shabal Kenuach Besuda. So far, life is good. We have the Mishabura, both in the Mishabura and the Sharatzian. We have the Chazanish, we have the Stipler, all telling you that the bracha on Compote is the Beir Preetzel Eit because it's Kenuach Suda, and it's not Bazim with Soiva, and it's not. Therefore, it should be Pater. It should be Chayiv. Kenuach Suda, totally different thing. Adkan life is good. Now life starts getting complicated. Shlomo Zalman. Zalman cites the Mishabura, and for some reason they didn't send the previous page. And it's missing a paragraph of the previous page, so I'll summarize what it says. It's too complicated to start sending it around. He says, he brings the Mishabura, and he says, the Mishabura holds that it is kinuach, and you need to make a bracha. No, don't put this page on because it's Reish Mem Vav that I'm reading you so far. Get to Reish Mem Zayin in a moment. There's only 2 lines in Reish Mem Zayin. There's a mess up here. Left the previous page out. Says let's freeze. Says the Shlomo Zalman. He says Mitzarech in on the psak of the Mishabura. He says Halai ein regil lechol Paris Mishalom Rakik Kinok Suda. We only eat these Paris Mivshalom Kinuach Suda. Now he says something strange. The Imkain Havale Kabam Machmas Apas Hayel Ve'ain Ragil Leichlan Shalai B'Teicha Suda. The Kaini B'Tarmid Rabbeinu Yaina. So Rabbi Zalman asks the Kasha based on Rabbeinu Yaina. What's the Rabbeinu Yaina? So the Rabbeinu Yaina is brought here, page or 2 down. I've been threatening to learn this Rabbeinu Yaina with you since the beginning of the cycle, but let's take it inside now. Rabbeinu Yaina has a shita where the Rabbeinu Yaina focuses on whether or not it's used to eating it b'seicha suda or not. That's all. No kinuach, no anything else. Is it eaten b'seicha suda? Pater. Eaten outside of a suda? Chayiv. That's it. And as we said, this is likely Shita the Rambam, who makes known of the Echalukim that the Rishonim make. Let's see the Rebbeinu inside. Rebbeinu eats the Gezakim.
A Seuda, within which you eat it, Your Potter according to Rabbi, what is the definition of a Seudah? Is it between both?
I think what the definition is reasonably clear. I think let's take your kasha and work with it, Tzvi. When is the Suda over? Because the last chelik of the Gemara there's Varma Baim Achar Hasuda. So we're trained since we're with children to learn that Varma Achar Hasuda is benching. But what happens if you stop eating? You haven't benched yet. Big discussion in the Paiskim, as you heard one of the HBachos last week, that could be. He went backwards a shtickle because we were using a tape. So he gave the end of Kufein Zayin. That could be the end of the Suda. But everybody kind of agrees that a Suda means when you wash on bread, that's a Suda. You didn't need anything else besides bread. And today's day and age, different type of Sudas. But the Beniyona here, in the paragraph in Riyah Zakein, teaches chat in a totally different way. It says, Pirish Oid, Ein Tes. Where are you? Must be the page before. Different mask. No, so where is it here? The wrong page?
What's the Dibur Moscow?
Rabbi Yitzchak Zakin. It's funny because what I'm staring at is a different page. Is this in the? There it is.
There it is.
Right there. Rabbi Yitzchak Zakin. Pirish Eid B'din Acher. No. This is the one on the right from Marchai. Pirish, the one on the right, the one in the bottom right. So scroll it up. Pirish B'din Acher. The Amaded phrase. The Varm Haboy Matach the Sudim Tech the Sudim Krank and Basar Beitz McBean with Dogim. She'ain Derech Lechol Eis and Shalai Basha Sudim Kamay Shederech Lechol Paris. A person wants a snack in the time of the Rishonim. They ate an apple. They did not sit down or eat an egg, which I think is true today too. Egg is eaten as a meal. It's not eaten as a snack. Maybe you'll kind of that a person eats a piece of cheese as a snack, but really not. It's lunch. Nobody carries around a piece of cheese in his pocket, and many people carry around apples in their pocket. There, Gottesman, if you come to Varma Elish Berkman Lechon Teich to the same Mikro Sude, the Kimishim has been the Kavasim Mil Kelas Bia. Now he mixes in the Rajba. Api Shaichal Lesson Blay Pass, Einem Avarach Alein Klash and the Chlal Im Pass Achle. And the might see patches them. However, Avo, you see you're right there. Var Moshe Einaba Machsudu, how's that defined? That's the apples. But then why do I say pass Einam Ikar Asudu with tuna brachol of Nayam? But here it says if you didn't eat it with pas, mash ate it with pas, you put even on the apple. So this is the shita which the contemporary discussions want to make into the shita that's really different, even though it's a collaboration of the previous shitas. Says Shlomo Zalman, according to this Rabbi Yaina, why do you have to make a bracha on Compote? Why is it not considered to be? I'm going to read you his language. What happened to it? Yeah, here it is. He says, "Ein sham u'b'shlah l'chem estaver she'af ma'achal Compote dvarim sh'ragin l'aychlim gambali suda shaper chayev my glida avo shezichen v'tapuchem b'vushalem harayim boy machmas apas." Strangely, he says, "What's a shazif, Rabbi Parkov?
Plum.
A plum.
Plum, or a baked plum, a cooked
No.
plum,
Could
Raw
be.
plum. Raw plum.
a cooked plum, or a cooked apple, not baked apple, cooked apple." He says, "Machmas apas." The Leimar, I wish you had it in front of you. I really could send it to you. Kisha oichlim pas. Give me a second here, and then maybe let's go fast. Because it's a very strange Rosh Hashanah. I don't have a lot of time here. Okay. It's coming to your way from Mordechai. Let me know when it comes. So Shlomo Zalman Kasha, I want you to see that one line he has here in the bottom, because it's an important line, our luck. Shlomo Zalman's Kasha is somehow, he seems to say, and this is important, that if you eat pas and you like to eat cooked apples, now we have the next page. Go to the Ayel Baruch, the Mechashleim Ayel Baruch. I'm gonna, as I said, this is a little bit of a issue here. Shlomo Zalman out of left field says, I don't understand the Mishnah Berurah's psak. Okay, you can see the top line. The other thing will come in a second, and let's wait till it comes on because it's crucial to this plea. Take a Shlomo Zalman. So what do we have here by saying? We have so far the Mishnah Berurah saying unambiguously, you make a bracha because it's Kinuach Suda and it's not Nichol the Suda.
But at the on the bottom of this, he says he made a bracha.
I'm about to say that. It gets stranger and stranger. Now we have Shlomo Zalman asking a kasha, and the kasha is not clear exactly what the kasha is all about and where it's coming from. It's coming from this Rabbeinu Yaina. It's coming from this Shalah, which I'll show you inside in a moment. Mordechai, did it arrive? Just tell me it arrived.
Not yet.
What?
No.
Is that a yes or a no? No?
No.
Why doesn't this thing work? Send it again. I thought I could get away with that, you seeing the text inside, but since it's such a shver zah, I'm going to read to you again. He says, Shazifin, plums, tapuchim uvushalim, they're boy machmas a pas, which means when you eat them pas, you like to eat them, and a chanami, they're eating for kinuach. But somehow the fact, not clear why. Very strange svara in the Shlomo Zalman. All the achrayim jump, all the contemporary poskim want to know what is he talking about. First of all, in the Ben Yain that he quotes, so you see, his custom of Shabura, beautiful. Freeze here, Haini Batabiner Ben Yaina. V'ayin Shamu Bashalah, we'll see the Shalah in a second. The Chaim is Taver, Asham Compote from Shagin Lechem Gambli Suda, Shapar Choshkem, Maglida, whatever. Aval Shazifin, Tapuch B'Shalem. He says, is that true? This is a new definition by Machsa. Pas based on Rabbi Yain and the Shalah. Next, go back to Reish Mem Zayin, and you'll understand the context. And then the Chilm Sin of Tarm Ruchos. So HBachos points out, strangely enough, and this is one of the very strange situations here. Shlomo Zalman asks Akasha, basically out of no less than two of Amudei Olam, the Ben Yain and the Shalah, and then he says, but Lamaisa, he did like the Mishnah Berurah. Either he has a kasha, he doesn't have a kasha. What's the Shalah that he's basing on? So scroll down to the Shalah. There you go. Stop right. Paris Mishalan Abam Tekas to the Nil, if that tune and Gam came bracha. Where does Shlomo Zalman see in this Shalah what he's saying? Where does he see it? So I have a Choshev Talmud Chacham written many times in Shern. His name is Rabbi Uri Eisenthal, Talmud of Shmuel Auerbach, who wrote a sefer called Megillah Sefer, and he was zeicha to be Mishamash from Shlomo Zalman. And Shmuel must live in Shar Chesed, Anyway, in a sefer called Megillah Sefer, he says, I don't understand. Shlomo Zalman builds his Yisayid on Rabbeinu Yaina, and Rabbeinu Yaina Nachinami there says that something which is B'tay Chasuda is Pater, but Rabbeinu Yaina also says it has to be L'Hazbiyah. And no one eats dessert, lesbia. If you eat lesbia, Mr. himself told you.
Treats.
Marin, what do you call it? The marin, the carrots, you have to make a bracha. But we're talking about compote. So what did he bring me a rye from Rabbi Yaida? Rabbi Yaida is talking about those things, atakam ikar asuda. Almighty Rabbi Yaida says, whereas tapuchim, you eat all day, therefore you have to make a bracha. And says somehow, from Zalman says, therefore, if it's eaten within the Suda, it becomes part of the Suda. Where does he see this? Where does he see this? From Zalman learns from this Rabbi Yaina that since the Paris and Mavushal is not derech to eat them only b'teich Suda, that makes them like steak. And you don't have to make a bracha. That's not clearly what the Rabbi Yaina says. When Rabbi Yaina is mashma, only those things, the Baram Hasbiyah. He uses the word Hasbiyah. Where does someone see this in the Pliyat Summa? What about the shalah? You bring a rye from a shlar. No rye from the shlar either. Right? Why? The shlar clearly says, look at the shlar again. The reason you need to make a bracha rishon person b'shalom, because in that regil lavai likra suda. And he says, would come out that even if they're regilim to bring them the Sefer Suda, as our Compote is, but that's not nechshav kiboyim leikar hasuda. Look at Lashon of Shalah. She'ein regilim lavi leikar hasuda. Good, nuchanami. That's what Compote is. What's the right from the Shalah? If anything, maybe it's a right for carrots. If you're going to bring the carrots, which is a part of a real course to fill you up because you're not yet seiched, you're a shiva bachar, and you're ravenous, and you haven't yet eaten bashtain mir. But what's he bringing the rye here? In this shalah, this is sarachi and gadol. So we have no clear hechra here in the Shlomo Zalman. So this is problem number one. What is shitas Shlomo Zalman? Now, as Rabbi Parker points out, all the Talmidim of Shlomo Zalman were made, including Rav Nevensal, including others. Shlomo Zalman himself said, make a bracha. So what's going on here? What's going on here? So this is mystery number one. Other achrayim will hold clearly like the Mishabura is the Chut Hashani. The Chut Hashani brought here just later. Paskins brings the Mishabura. Keep on going. I'll tell you. I have to go back and forth here a little bit because this part with the Chofetz Chaim we're going to get to in a few moments. The Mishabura Gottesman ain't the B'chal Mashavim my Paris for Compote. The Zeh Einay Bal a Muslim Krak Lak Nilpsu Tzarek Bracha, and then he discusses the Chofetz Chaim's Chazara, alleged Chazara, which we'll see in a moment. Let me close the first part of the shir here with showing you two of the tainas here under Shlomo Zalman, which we're going to need to see if we can fetch them right for the Chofetz Chaim's other side too. So later there's a sefer called Nesivos HaBracha. Should I start with the? Yes, let's start with the long. So, but let's start with the Megillah Sefer. He'll take a few lines out. No time to go through this. Nesivos HaBracha. Sorry, still 2 minutes too. So we'll start the second part of the Chofetz Chaim at 12:02 or 4.
You can summary at the end of the second part.
I will. Oh, the first part, second part, of course. Okay, in the Nesivos HaBracha, he brings the Shlomo Zalman. It was a sefer, another contemporary sefer. He says, what's the right from the Rabbi Yaina? And what's the right from the Shlomo? He has the same two kashas. So he says, I'll tell you what the issue is. In paragraph Achin Yesh Chashashu. Sheva, last paragraph. Keeping for Gin Lechel Compote Several Sudas and Nefshel Chelik Masuda. They took this chumrah of making a bracha on a prichai. Aisha Achlu HaCompote Yachad and Pas Mamish. Where did this chumrah come from? So, believe it or not, this chumrah came from the Goyin. The Goyin was not comfortable with how the shittas worked out. He was not comfortable either with making a bracha because he was choshesh, as you can see here. Maybe somehow the dessert had become part of the suit and it's potter, so he couldn't make a bracha of atala. So therefore, he would bring a prey. Because it was choshesh. The varm shenik lom lias mishilus with the hariyam k'shiv the varm shenik tabs to talk about bracha shleina. V'amagia kasav du'lefi zayich l'peres mivshon kashim. Afshal sevet tzarich varach tefillah. Maybe even if you eat a plum and below the suit, you have to make a bracha. Ein le'epach. And he goes backwards and forwards, and he brings Me'idin, and he brings this Edis of the Chofetz Chaim. So Adkan, let me make a sikum here for the first part of Rabbi said. Well, we had so far, we went through the 5 shittas of the Rishonim on what Dvarim B'Yom B'Teicha Suda is, and what the site of the Torah is, and the Shaila is, what about contemporary Compote? The Mishnah Berurah, both in the Mishnah Berurah and the Sharetzian, says clearly, unambiguously, that Compote is something which requires a bracha. It's not Varam Baim Teicha Suda Machmas Asuda Shalom Machmas Asuda. It's arguably Likinoach Ba'alma, and unambiguously the Chofetz Chaim in the Mishnah Berurah and the Sharetzion says that on Compote you make a Weiche Beri Ha'etz. So the Zalman somehow decided that he wants to be chelik in this Mishnah Berurah, and he's me'er from Shita number 4 plus 4a that we went through in the Shita of the Rishonim, the Rabbi Yaina, that somehow anything eaten within a Suda becomes a chelik of the Suda. Rabbi Yaina says this has to be Mazbiyah. Somehow he didn't seem to be mischasha with that. What a raya from Shalom Kodesh. Shalom Kodesh seemed to use language which is totally different because it has to be Love L'Ikar Asuda. This is not Love L'Ikar Asuda. Nevertheless, from Zalman, seems to paskin in his Mincha Shlema that it's potter because it's B'Yom B'Teicha Asuda. This would run contrary to the Minhagim of the Chofetz Chaim, and contrary to the Chazon Ish, to the Stipler, numerous other Gedol Yisrael who made bracha on Compote. If this would be the end of the story, no problem, because as Rabbi Parker pointed out in the Megillah and in other places in the vast world of Rav Shlomo Zalman, they pointed out that Rav Shlomo Zalman himself, even though he had nice svaris, didn't change his niyug, and he passed it, and he was noyeg gefeirt sich with the Mishnah Berurah. He made a bracha on Compote b'seif Suda, the b'seif Suda. Adkan. If life would stop here, it would be relatively handleable because most poskim would tell you, at worst, not at worst, at most chumrah, like to go in, take a perichai. The second eitzah that we heard requires much more detail is take pas. That the pas is the beginning of Suda help. There's a pas at the end of Suda help. How you have to eat this pas, we discussed that this is a discussion of the poskim, which we'll get to hopefully at the end of the year. But Lamaisa, life wouldn't be too complicated because Rav Minyan and Binyan of Klal Yisrael would go ahead. You want to be Medag Mitzvahs, take a raw apple. You don't want to be Medag Mitzvahs. Yes, I'll be in Lismach to make a bracha, and they're not going to have any problems with Shemaim because if they ask you why you made this bracha, they're going to take out this, 10,000 page spreadsheet, and they're going to ask you why you made a bracha on Chodesh Tammuz, Tavshin Pei Gimel, and you said because I learned the Mishnah Berurah to make a bracha. No problem. And if you have a problem, you just push the button, and the Chofetz Chaim himself comes and takes you off the hook. However, Not so simple.
Does not make a bracha.
What?
What about to not make a bracha? It's be considered part of the Suda.
Who said you don't make a bracha? What the svara would be not to make a bracha?
I'm expensive part of my, I know every single meal I get compote at the end of my meal. So this is part of my meal. So there's no reason to make a bracha.
So Rabbi Yaakov is postulating a scenario, he's asking a kasha, why doesn't the taka become part of the Suda, which is what Shem Zalman's svara seem to have been, because I'm an old style European Jew, and my Rebbe considers me compote every single day without fail. Why doesn't it become part of the Suda? The answer is just because Rebbetzin Yaakov serves you food every single day compote, doesn't take away the fact that the status of this compote is kinuach. And therefore, kinuach is not dvarim haboim machmas hapas. Sorry.
Isn't that what Mary wants?
Isn't that what who wants?
Isn't that what the carrots put before?
No. The way the carrots was, it was masbia. Carrots was part of the food of your caloric intake. The somehow the compote is not considered to be by the dietitian to be part of your caloric intake. If you need 2,000 calories a day, the compote is exempt, doesn't count because it's just there for quinoa. The carrot story that you had earlier, just the saga of the soggy carrots, that is for Mozain Ulahazbia. So you need to know what the purpose of the food is in order to be kaveya, what the bracha is. Okay, Rabbi Sai, we're now starting the second of Shir, so I'm going to do a sequel here, Rabbi Sai. First part of Shir, we went through two important things. I'm going to show the Mishnah Berurah inside again, if we can put it back on again, for those who just joined. The question is the bracha on Compote. You're telling me what's so interesting that we need a whole share on this here? The answer is it is interesting because there is a big historical to-do about this. And I'm going to explain the historical to-do in a moment. So let's chazer for those who just came online and in. The Mishnah Berurah, please put up the master. The Mishnah Berurah in Kufayim Zayin Sivkat Dal says the bracha on the page one. The bracha on Compote is very creates. It brings even bigger chedushin. You cooked peiros with basar. You still have to make a bracha on the peiros. The Chayodim holds otherwise. This is information that we imparted in the first part of the shir. At the end
It's not clear. These payers that were cooked with the basar, I'm eating them together with the basar or separately.
Okay, so let's not go there because, as I said, that's a separate question. We discussed it earlier. Let's go to the end of this Mishnah Berurah because I want to focus on the Compote. We'll take questions at the end. Here, the Mishnah Berurah says, the aim, the chlal, the last two lines, Mashavim ad peris misham k'nuach suda. Interesting enough, the Mishnah Berurah tries to bevarn Rabbi Yaakov's kasha. How does he characterize these peris? How does he characterize them? How are they being brought? How many are being brought?
Ma'at.
No. So where does he say machmas hasuda? The kinuach suda. Sorry. Kinuach. Ma'at lekinuach. So you have tarta. What's the right word? Not l'riyusa chas v'shalom. Tarta l'tilusa. But you have tarta to take you away from a tour that it's part of the suda. It's ma'at, and it is kinuach suda. Shekar Compote. For those of you not here earlier, the wizardry of my wordsmith turned up the word Compote. No, where does Compote come from? Compote comes from the French word, which is turned into a modern word, compost. It means it's a bunch of stuff all together. Compost. And this is Ein, Bal, Amazon, Klal, Rakla, Kinuach, Suda, Vitzach, Bracha, and unambiguous. And the Sharatzian scroll down. Quickly, the Sharatzian scroll down. The Mishnah Berurah seems to be revarn your kasha again. That's your kasha. Every single day your wife brings a compote. Doesn't matter. Why? So the shir just stopped here. As I said, we would have no problem. No. This is the paragraph. We haven't gotten to that bracket yet. I'm going to start the bracket right now. You're confused, and you have a good reason to be confused. Okay, and then we pointed out that this psak in Mishnah Berurah is then Mishnah Berurah goes into the Sharet Tzion, adds very important information. We got the tzimis, apple tzimis, which is really a different form of apple compote. Apple tzimis depends where you eat it. You eat it as a side dish, it's putter. You eat it as compote, can be the same, pretty much the same food, right? I don't know. Apple tzimis is cold. Compote is cold tzimis, really. Okay, I know there's some minor variations in how it's made, or what it's made of, but l'maisa, if you eat it, the teicha suda as a dish on your plate with the meat, on a separate dish of the meat, but during the meat, butter, you use kinuach suda, you are chayiv, and then we goes into the saga of the sagi carrots we discussed before the break. The Chazon Ish, Dinam and Hagais, the Stipler, and Erchais Rabbeinu all made a bracha following the Mishnah Berurah Adkan. Life is one. However, and this starts with a sefer called Tzaddik of Shlomo. Tzaddik of Shlomo, I forgot his last name. Anybody remember his last name? He was a Talmud Muvik of the Chofetz Chaim. And he wrote a sefer similar to the Meir and Yisrael. Blach, right? Shlomo Blach, right? Thank you. With the Aleph, Shlomo Blach, the old Yiddish way, so the old Yiddish way. So he writes a sefer, a story, and he was invited to the Chofetz Chaim for Shabbos Suda. And the Chofetz Chaim held that when you eat compote today, b'seicha suda, that is dvarim abayim b'teicha suda, and you're not required to make a bracha alav. This Eidos caused a huge mahumara by side, because this is totally against the Mishnah Berurah and the Sharet Tzion that you're staring at. Mishnah Berurah and the Sharet Tzion tell you that it's dvarim shaloi b'ayim machmas suda, and therefore requires an eitz. Where did this Rav Shlomo come to tell you that the Chofetz Chaim have scrolled down to the Halichos Manhagos? Sorry, Tzaddik of Shlomo, keep on going. Keep on going. Here it is. We'll come back to the bracket in a second. I don't know if we have. I don't know if we have this. Tzaddik of Shlomo. I don't know what's after the Mincha Shlomo. I think after the Mincha Shlomo is the Shalah. The Shalah. We have this Tzaddik of Shlomo. Keep on going. These are the discussion about the Shlomo Zalman. There you go. Yud Beis. So Siper. Rabbi Chaim Savar. Kima Shoel B'yan Compote. Sefer Suda Varm Dom Suda Ein Shal Chavar Chalav. I say. All of a sudden, we have a stira in the Mishnah Berurah if you're going to go with this story. Since I don't like stories, and this actually happens to be an important story, here's another story. There was a Chashav Yiddish case in Rabbi Nachum Grossbart. I think it was a Frag's brother, or maybe he was, I'm not sure. Could be it was his father. He learned in Panovich Yeshiva. I guess in Panovich in Europe. On Rosh Hashanah, they made Kiddush, as yeshivas do here today. It already started in Europe. And he went into the Panovich Rav for Kiddush on Rosh Hashanah for Tekiyas. And the Panovich Rav was the Talmud of Chofetz Chaim. Formal Talmud, informal Talmud. I think the Panovich Rav actually learned in Radin for a while in the Kalakutchin. He ate the Suda once at the Chofetz Chaim, and he came towards the end of the Suda. It was already the Chofetz Chaim was a Knusai, and the Chofetz Chaim said not to make a bracha, which is a problem because you take out the Mishnah Berurah. Chelik Beis was already published l'chayra, and the Chelik Beis, the Chofetz Chaim, who happened to be the same person as the Mishnah Berurah, said you make a Be'er Pri-Eitz. So what's Tradia? The Panovich Rav told this Rabbi Grossbart, you can believe me. Says Rosh Hashanah Fad Tekiyas, I'm not being Mishaker. Rabbi Gottesman. So I checked this with the Baltimoreans. I saw HBachos this morning. I said, listen, Shiva, I have to say a shir on Dvar Suda. I want to check a famous vote with you, Shem Gottesman. Says, yes, he heard the same thing. Gottesman heard from the Chofetz Chaim that the Chofetz Chaim was hayret not to make a bracha, which is keneged what he wrote in the Mishabura. What is happening here, Rabbi say? So the source of some of this is both in the aforementioned Diaper Sefer, Erchus Rabbeinu, and also in the Chuvas and Hagas of the Bada L'chaim Taiv Maruchim. I spoke to someone last night who was in I went to see Rabbi Schneerberg yesterday, and he was talking learning with him. There was an oxygen part of the time, but that doesn't deter Gedel Yisrael. He made a big mahuma here too, and it's part of this. Let's see first the brackets in the Erchus Rabbeinu. So this is what HBachos waylaid me with a few moments ago. So Misha'alti is B'nai Shlita Shalagor Mendel Zaks. Who's this? So I grew up on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. Yitzchak knows that. And I went to a yeshiva called Yeshiva Chofetz Chaim. He knows that, right? You went there too?
No, the kids.
The kids did. And I remember Mendel very well. He was Nifton in the Lamitz. I was already a big boy. And he was, of course, Mendel Zaks, Chofetz Chaim's Hayden. So the Zakses, his children lived in America. Gershon was a big goyin, Talmud of Briskerov. Herschel, Israel Racha, was my Manal in Yeshiva. He had one son who married into the Chevron of Melucha in Chevron. His name was Rav Hillel, and he was Rosh in Chevron for many years till he started his own yeshiva, a going of Hillel's ex. So the Stipler asked Hillel's ex who he had access to. I don't know, I'm not sure. Maybe it was Rav Gershon, because Rav Gershon was named Stroh Watt, learned Briskerov, Quaistisht. But they needed the Adis in this. What's going on here? And they asked the son of Mendel, I'm presuming it's Rav Hill, and I'll tell you in a moment how I have firsthand knowledge of this. The Chofetz Chaim was Kaiser, because otherwise, how could you explain this? We have all these chashuv people giving you edus that the Chofetz Chaim said to make a bracha, and Mishaburi says not to make a bracha. And Mishaburi says make a bracha. Mishaburi said tzarich levarach. V'amar she'aviv hagayim Reb Mendel. This is Rav Hill talking. Shal asmar Chofetz Chaim. He asked him. He asked the Shver, what's the story? V'amar loy shehadas noita shekein tzarich levarach. Mishabur says that v'yah machna bracha. Ava kanira shechavtz atzmei ba'atzmei leiberach. What's going on here? Similar to the Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah came up with svara fakir. Rosh Hashanah came up with svara not to make a bracha, but he did make a bracha. Chofetz Chaim was fakir. Chofetz Chaim told you to make a bracha, but lamaisa the Chofetz Chaim didn't make a bracha. So we're left with this mevucha. What is the story here?
There's a story in the stories, because this is saying it was a personal hanhaga, and the story you mentioned before is that he told the people at the table not to make a bracha, so it wasn't personal.
I'm only telling you what says in Sefer Meir in Yisrael. I wasn't there. Now I do have first-hand knowledge of this, Rabbi say. About 12 years ago, I was ready to Seif Yamav. I was like to have Rav Hillel's axe. My guest for Shabbos. Rare The covet really went to my Rebbetzin, because we didn't know each other. He only knew that I had a sheikhus because I was learned in his father's yeshiva. So, and he remembered my father, was the president of yeshiva for many years, but he didn't know whether he could eat my house. He didn't know me. He came from Eretz Yisrael. We invited him to speak the Yarkal, and I was able to have him for a whole Shabbos in my house. He brought along his own pots and his own foods because he didn't know. After he met my wife and spoke to her for a few minutes, he dispensed with his own pots and he ate her food. So it was much more a compliment to my Rebbetzin than it was to me. I'll call upon him. I asked him. I wasn't the only one sitting there. Basically, when you have a Godly Yisrael come, you invite somebody to come. And this question came up. He was peppered from Hill since he rarely came to America. I think he was only here a couple of times. He was peppered. Obviously he grew up here. I think he actually was here for a short while when Rav Aaron was still alive, but then he married in Israel. He didn't come back very often, so he was peppered with all sorts of shilas, but all the shilas, all the stories about the Chofetz Chaim. How big was the Chofetz Chaim's becher? No, don't laugh. This is one of the biggest problems in Klal Yisrael, in halacha in Klal Yisrael. And of course, he was ma'asher that the Chofetz Chaim's becher was a very small becher. And he uses becher with Kiddush, and he uses becher without kaisis. And, we had a becher there, which I deliberately bought a smallish becher that was smaller than that. And how many matzahs did the Chofetz Chaim ate? Isaki ate 2 matzahs, but he ate the kitzer, ate 2 gezesim, but the 2 gezesim were not the same gezesim as we have. In the last third of gezesim, as you all know, when the Scotland and I need 5 times as much. We asked him all these questions. We asked him about the dessert. And he says, it kanireh that the Zayda was chayzer, but he never heard, and this is backed up here, a clear reason from his father why the Zayda Taka was chayzer. However, not everybody agrees with this, and we're going to spend the rest of the time that we have available for us trying to delve into the mystery of the Chofetz Chaim's chazara. Let's start here with Sefer Chulas Van Hagis, from the aforementioned Again Rav Moshe Sternbuch. You know what? Okay, Chulas Van Hagis, fine. We'll come back to the Chut Shani, I guess. You know what? Chut Shani was nifter a few years ago, so arguably, I'm not sure if he was old as Mark Yamim. But let's take a look at the Chut Shani here. I think it's the page before or the page after. I think it's the page before. Yeah. He says, "Mashal Eimrim shachofetz Chaim chazer by taksa b'seif yamav v'amar shaloi levarach al zeh be'emtza suda zeh einoi." No. Yerigilen la'eichel l'kinuach la'kein shap v'varach al zeh be'emtza suda. This is a man of few words, and he says, not true. Chofetz Chaim wasn't chazer. I only know what it says. And what it says in the Mishabura is you need to make a bracha. Not only that, my uncle, the Chazon Ish, made a bracha. But even you want to taina, the Mishabura controls. Mishabura wrote, you need to make a bracha. All these stories, they're stories. Problem is, we do have a lot of Eidos that seems to indicate that. So my Shneimach, as always, brings the story. Mishabura Mavur, Shetarach Levarach al Compote, Shein el Knuach Suda V'Tzarach Bracha. Aval Shamanu Eidos Ne'mona Halacha L'Maisa. Shebiziknusai, in his old age, Chazer Bay, Uba'atzmai Lai Berach Ala Compote. I am Sefer Tzaddik of Shlomo. Shemaybe Gam Ken Edusim Chofetz Chaim She'ein Mevarchen al Compote. M'chein Kasav Agdamis Leiv L'Yo. Not sure who that Sefer that is. Rabbi Yapian, who was a Talmud of Chofetz Chaim, right? Yeah. I think so. And then he brings the Briskerov. Brisker is not connected to Chofetz Chaim directly, but the Brisker had a different anhaga. Reisi should digdek lechel and pas dafkid have a ikor paiter tuffel. Brisker would only eat compote with bread. Not such a big kasha. I mean, that's one of the things that already brought earlier in the Paiskim. So the Brisker would be makbid in this is not a shock at all. And he said an interesting story. There's a kamet tzadikim chilku bezeh shebeshabbos a compote mana kavua b'shayich l'suda v'ein levarach u'b'choyel dafkim mevarchim. And he says, brings this b'shem the Taina Polarov. Now, maybe this goes with Yaakov's Svara earlier. That's the difference. What's the difference between Shabbos and the weekdays? It makes sense. Shabbos people generally have set menus, right? Everybody in this room eats with slight variations because it's fancy Nayazachin have crept in my house now in the last 10, 15 years. They started eating dips. If my father would have seen a dip on the table, he would have said, "Was this a bris?" He would have not been mitchaches to this. But now the kids they added a fifth course to the meal, right? It used to be fish soup, the main course, and then this, and now there's a nayazach dips, which okay, since you're washing, l'chayret's potter out the bar. I'm not 100% sure, but anyway, that's a different shayla. But on Shabbos, you generally have kavuatika menus, and you can become a shtickle Sfardi also, but the menu is kavua. And the week you don't have a kavuatika menu, so maybe that makes it part of the Suda on Shabbos, and therefore it's potter on Shabbos. But if that's the case, Chofetz Chaim didn't know what Suda's Shabbos is all about. He only discovered Suda's Shabbos b'Soif Yomam. Let's try this. Why would that make a difference here?
It became more common.
What?
It became more common.
Oh, so Yaakov is saying that Nesashru Hadairais, it became more common because they couldn't afford Paris until the 1910s or whatever, and the Chofetz Chaim was Kaiser 1920, he was Nifter in 33, right? So he was Kaiser from his original psak, maybe. Then he brings the Goin that we mentioned. We'll see what Rav says in a moment. Goin may have been, the Goin says, Varim Shenikun Lias Ketavsho Suda Varach Olav, B'Shaper Daita Sheb'Shabbos Compote Kavua Ein Levarach. Kavua means it's always served, and therefore, according to Rabbi Yaina, it becomes part of the Suda because no one eats compote outside of the Suda and Shabbos, and every Suda contains compote. Okay, now he adds three more important issues. Issue number one: so I don't know why he says minhag. This is broader than Mishabura. So you have to make as a chumrah mishtadlin, which means it's the chumrah, which means it's for me this chasidus, to make a bracha on an apple, on something, apple sauce with the apple. Mechaven, you have to have kavanah, which always is tricky. Lifter b'zeh compote. So everybody say, it seems what we have here is a Sfeika Dedina. Maybe, and the Sfeika Dedina is based on a Sfeika Metzias. Maybe the compote is part of the Suda, which is Potter, and maybe it's not part of the Suda. So we got to look for eitzes. Eitzah number one is Perichai. Eitzah number two is Pas. Says Ramesh Sternbach, Perichai only works if it's Nicker Nicker Hapri. Mazeh. Hint. This is part of the test, Rabbi say. Mazeh. I think you guys are Potter because I think you were not here yet. Maybe when did you come on? You came in when we learned Risuk? What's he bavarning here, Rabbi say? What he's bavarning is this problem that if the applesauce is so finely smooth, then what's the bracha on the applesauce? That's the Gottesman verdient. That's the Gottesman verdient. Yes, you made a bracha of Bayer Priya eights, but the Bayer Priya eights only patters another eights if the second thing is an eights. If the second thing is a shahako, an eighth doesn't pater a shahako. Maybe a shahako paters eighths under certain circumstances, but a shahako doesn't. The eighth doesn't pater shahako.
How about ice cream?
Of ice cream. Okay, I can't. I'm talking here about Compote. I'm not talking about ice cream glida, even though I should be talking about that. So we'll do that in the course of the week. Rabbi Londinsky and Rabbi Callis are going to rattle off enough foods for you between now and Thursday that you're going to be swimming in foods. Let's see. When I was a bacher, okay, we have another edis from Hadaina Mordechai Shapiro. I saw Simcha watching one pretty good edis. Eat cooked fruit at the end of the meal with bread. And we saw us watching him. He said the Tata fleck das Essen mit Freud. I don't know. Maybe you can ask the Kasha, since nobody was closer to the Chofetz Chaim than the Tata. Why didn't Rabbi Chanan? Why didn't Rabbi Simcha tell us that Rabbi Chanan originally made a bracha, and when the Chofetz Chaim was kaiser, he stopped making a bracha. It was chayshish for the shita, and he ate it with pas. Okay. Interesting enough, all the stories we have here, none of them say the Chofetz Chaim ate it with pas, and I wonder why. They just say yes a bracha, no bracha. Why didn't they just use the simple eights of why did Chofetz Chaim use the simple eights of pas? Would be himself praised in Mishabura. So I'm asking a steer from the stories to the Mishabura again. But now Ramosha says, it's so smooth in the upper left that it's a shahako. Compote is a shahako. Definitely you mark pretty high by every eight. And it barish nifta mashal spayach. It's barchas shahako, and the sun is back to Reish Beis, which we spent 2 weeks on. Upri paita davar raksha barchas eights. That's why barchas shahako doesn't help. The same as smayach, if it's smooth, creamy applesauce, which most applesauces are, we're right back into the problem. Then you start looking for another shako. You have to go find some sugar base. Starts getting complicated. I wonder how many people are machmas, Rabbi say. You're looking for nice chumras. So Rabbi Bergman was the whole island, tell you the bench and the bencher. There's hundreds of chumras that we already learned. We learned scores, but there are hundreds in Hilchos Brachos. Here's another one. Don't stop eat applesauce. You want to eat applesauce? You have all sorts of, you have double set of problems with applesauce. First of all, maybe it's very smooth and it's shahako if you're eating it outside the suda. Second of all, do you make a bracha on the applesauce or not? If there's apples, do you have to eat pas? So being a pious halachic Jew in Hilchos Brachos is very difficult. So if you look at all the haskamas to the contemporary brachos farm, you see all the maskim say the same thing. Hilchos brachos is dvarim shebekashin shebsefer Chaim. You think, in Shulchan Aruch, you think, muktzah is shver. They don't say that. Hilchos brachos is shver, and I think we already discussed it several times. Reading that in ribuya shitas. Say, hey, you have ribuya stories. V'yasolanu shebekampot shempiri by nikar hatem kivin shavushal v'sudla yivarach all the common paiskim. However, he brings in the bracket Chaznish made a bracha. When the smayach repeats again, then you got a problem. Does it's nisayach. However, and now we come to the last point he brings, which is the fruit cup before. I am going to leave this out because I may or may not have time. As I said, I want to come back to two halachic issues. One is the fruit cup, which is right here. We'll try to get to it 5 to 12, 5 to 1. And the second thing is how much pasta you have to eat. I need to finish the story first. So what do you do here, Rabbi say? What's the Maisa here with the Chofetz Chaim? So Rabbi Scheinberg, who I believe has a powerful hook on this call here, was very unhappy with this business that we have to be chayshish for the Chofetz Chaim's Gozara. Because the Chofetz Chaim wrote a sefer, which is Kabbalah Chaltz Yisrael. If you're going to start saying the Chofetz Chaim was chayzer and everything he wrote in the Mishabura, the Chofetz Chaim, the Mishabura, if you think about it in the history of halacha, the Mishabura, since it was zeicha to a emdah, a finality, which no sefer since the Mechaber and Rambam himself was zeicha to, because the Magen Avraham has a taz all over him, then Shach, and all the big Mesa Kalim, and all the G'dolei Olam, The Gedolei Olam had chelkim every single svar they had. The Kveg said something, the Beis Meir didn't like it. And the Goyen said something, the Graz didn't like it, and Fakir. But the Mishabura, everybody, and maybe it's a Shvachkeit of the Dyer, but the Mishabura controls all our psakim. Says Rav Steinberg, and we're going to be chosher to this. Then you have to be chosher that everything you wrote in Mishabura was chayzer, and that's what Rabbi Karelis means when it says Einai. Now, where do we get this Rabbi Steinberg from? It's printed in this farm. I asked Rabbi Ledinsky, and he says it's well known that Rabbi Steinberg was very unhappy with this because he didn't allow stakus in the Mishabura. Parkov, you ever heard anything on this from him directly?
With the compote or the appetizer?
No, the Chazara of the Chofetz Chaim and the Mishabura.
Not specific about the Chazara, but he said to make a bracha on compote. That's what he told us.
Made to make a bracha like the Mishabura Paskins.
Yes.
This means that he's not chosher for the story. Okay, so we still don't know what exactly caused this alleged Chazara, even if assuming the Chazara was correct. So Rabbeinu, I'm going to Nissen Kaplan, say that because many of us have heard many shiurim from him in the course of the last 20 plus years. And he wrote a classical sefer on Shulchan Aruch, on the Perication of the Varfa called Shami Nissen. Wrote several svarim, one in Brachos, one in Shabbos before he and he, as you all know, having heard him speak, would go straight to the top to get a psak. He asked him Chaim. Now, this is not such a big chiddush because we know what the Chazon Ish said and we know what the Stapler said. So it's not such a big chiddush to hear what Reb Chaim said. And he asked the Reb Chaim, do we have to be chayshish to the Chofetz Chaim was chayzim b'rot m'shabur n'sharetzim? And he says, "Ein nachay," same as Rav Nissen. But Chofetz Chaim loy chazar boy. That's the language which is here printed in the Shami Nissen. Look at this page here. He starts off here on the upper right. Yesh machmir v'chayshin shleil varach and Compote v'suda v'ech ma'asim pas. Chein naga griz. Ela b'zeh tell you meichla Compote kulim pas. Emes, you don't need to make a bracha. The problem with that is, as we'll see, how do you eat it with pas? Not so pashut. He said, those are naig lech l'tchila v'seifma pas, lo yehila b'zeh. We'll come back to this issue with how much of the pas you have to eat if you want to use this eitzah. In the Compote, where are we? Gimel. Let's say said Baruch Martin Agrach Kanievsky in the bottom. Don't have time to go through the whole thing. Achar b'kashas mechilim rachas kvei teras shlita. Ma'achra ba'ich lifton. I guess he was being nizar here because he knew Chaim was going to blast him. Sefer sudim tzarich levarach bracha rulai. K'mash kasa had Mishabura shared tzion. As yesh lachos lamasha me'idin kamai ticham chashuvas v'anagais. The same tasnei Chofetz Chaim. So Chofetz Chaim chazar bay, talking about the Zach's family. Actually, Eidinach of Chofetz Chaim chazar bay. How did Chofetz Chaim know? He had Kodesh, maybe, but he knew because his father told him. How did his father know? Because the Chazon Ish told him. How did the Chazon Ish know? Did the Chazon Ish hold that way Misvara? Or the Chazon Ish was made directly on the Chofetz Chaim? I'm not sure. If you say that ain't nothing because the Chazon Ish paskin, you have to make a bracha for shteyach. But how do they know that the Chofetz Chaim wasn't chayzer? So the way we saw earlier, they're learning that way because we know that the Stapler and everybody else would not take leniencies in fooling around with the Mishabura's possible chazara. Okay, and then he talks about ice cream, which I will get to, B'li Neder, to answer Tzvi's question. Should you remember to come back to the ice cream? It's here in the Shami Nissen. So what are we doing now, Rabbi say? So why are there so many edus that the Chofetz Chaim was chayzer? So he doesn't bring it here in the Sefer, because here in the Sefer he brings the psak of Reb Chaim, but it is his shiurim, and he's written it elsewhere. Reb Nissen brings the following story. He heard this from his shver, Shlita. Shver is Rabbi Gurvitz, Rashiv of Gateshead, one of the Chashav Talmid Chacham of the entire Dar. Says Rabbi Gurvitz heard this from I don't know where he heard it from. I think he heard it from his father. Must have heard it from his father, right? Heard it from Leib, I assume. His father, Stamatz Gedait by the Chofetz Chaim. That the following story. The Chofetz Chaim, and you can put this story together of a story, you can decide whether you want to accept it or not. Everybody knows the Chofetz Chaim spent a significant amount of time with Zeknusai on the road. Hard to believe, but he went around peddling his sefer. He had to convince people to buy it. We printed in one of the last volumes of Assurance some correspondence, and we printed it just to show what the status of Yiddishkeit in America to America. And you can see how many Mishnah Berurahs there were. Only a few literature Rabbanim in America were interested in the Mishnah Berurah. Nobody was interested. Hard to believe. And there's a whole list of how many Mishnah Berurahs. He sent 60 Mishnah Berurahs to whole America, right? There's probably 60 in his building. This is what the Yiddishkeit in America looked like 100 years ago. Already 100 years. What? Eingenommen?
I mean, they didn't know the mission was.
No. The fact that the people in America heard there was a big tzaddik, Chofetz Chaim. First of all, the Chofetz Chaim was kind of his shame on his Sefer Chofetz Chaim, not on the Mishnah Berurah. Mishnah Berurah came second. So they heard that there was a big Chofetz Chaim, but they were not aware that the Chofetz Chaim was the guy of the Dar too. And they barely were aware there was such a, you couldn't send it by email. It had to physically arrive, and there had to be an audience here of people interested in it. And the 20s, there were very few people in America interested in the Sharat Tzion and a Bir Halacha, which discusses all the intricacies of Halacha. So it wasn't Pashut at all. And if you want, I can refer you exactly to the bills of lading, how many Sfarim he sent you. I'll tell you, and this is, I don't want to spend a lot of time to segue, the Chofetz Chaim's, the Mishnah Berurah wasn't a skabel in Europe in many twists in Israel. My grandfather was Mardikal Tamuda, Guy Nyla. He knew everything by heart, and he wrote Sfarim. He knew all of Shas, all the place, whatever. I know it's going to sound incredible. He grew up, he lived in Munkash. Munkash was a famous city, Ir Malaya, from the Sefer of Rosh and the Mechsalazar, besides being a big rabbi, was a Gain Eilam. And a lot of Rei Chashav Talmidim. There was not one Mishnah Berurah in the entire city. He never saw Mishnah Berurah until he got till after the war. Never. When they did a Shalom and Shulchan Aruch Chaim, they opened up the Shulchan Aruch, the old Lemberg Shulchan Aruchs. I was not even had those, and they looked in the Magen Avraham when they tried to pass in the Shiloh with the Magen Avraham, the Machzah Shekel, and the people got it. That's how you pass in Shiloh. They didn't have Mishnah Berurah, so it's not a kasha, and it wasn't a skabel. Back to this. So the Chofetz Chaim would go around. So why don't you ask a kasha in the story? Going around peddling this farm, trying to sell 3 farm in the small towns in Poland here and there, and he barely eked out the cost of the printing. That's what he's given. And the Chofetz Chaim would travel around and he would stay in hotels, in Kreshnas. That's where he went from place to place. He says in his first round, when he was selling Mishnah Berurah Chelik Aleph and Beis, Mishnah Berurah was not printed exactly in sequence. There's some very variations in the type that was printed. I think Vav came out Vav Gimel. I don't remember exactly. We've written on this extensively. I just remember it was Shikos like the Sidra. When he printed the first Mishnah Berurah, when he came to a hotel and he asked for an arucha, how much Chofetz Chaim ate, but he asked for a meal. So originally, they did not bring him Compote as part of the meal, unless he specifically ordered it, which means it was a separate line item in the menu. And therefore, the Chofetz Chaim deduced from that it can't be machmas asuda because it's not part of the pafrit, not part of the menu. And therefore, the Chofetz Chaim wrote that you're mechuyev to make a separate bracha by a pre-eitz because not part of the menu. 20 years later, it was 20 years. He went on peddling the Mishabura for 20 years, starting when he was 65 till he was 85. I guess the last 5-6 years of his life, maybe he stopped. He was Nifter, he was what, 96? I don't remember how old he was. Nifter 1933. He was in his 90s. But he did this Compote Seif Yama. When he went to a hotel, all of a sudden, the Paris appeared as, well, what do they call that? A price. The menu is what for when you get all the food together in the fixed price.
The bill.
It's not a la carte. What's the character of a la carte? What kind of item am I talking about? You guys don't even, you don't pay $400 a plate for the food here in the restaurants here in Lakewood. It's not a la carte. A la carte is individual things. It's all together. Snyder, what's that called? No. Open your mic. I can't hear you. So, the Chofetz Chaim found that the Paris was served as part automatically without asking, and all of a sudden it became clear to the it was Nishtana, maybe because of the aforementioned Svara that he got richer. Amflakat is whatever. Okay. This is the Svara that Rabbi Gurwitz heard from his father, who must have heard it from either the Chofetz Chaim or his close Talmidim. This Svara is also brought in the name of Yashiv, that this is a qua example of how the mores of the culinary Hagashos can change and changes the halacha. Since the Regilis is manenu is to be megish for Seifa Suda, and this is the Svara Yak said earlier, all the time. Dessert, you don't have a Suda today without dessert. Even a dessert, a Suda based saucy has a dessert. Your wife doesn't give you desserts, you glare at her. You may have a good reason not to, but still, you have a tefillah. It's mistaver that it becomes part of the Suda. Why? Maybe because of the Rabbeinu Yaina, that all of a sudden it's a chelik of the Suda. It's not bought lasbia. That's the problem with this svara. But at the end of the day, no matter how rugged it is to become part of the Suda, it can't be the Rabbeinu Yaina that controls, because the Rabbeinu Yaina clearly says lasbia. If you look back at the Rabbeinu Yaina, Lashon Rabbeinu Yaina, it's lasbia. So how could that be the solution to this problem? Nevertheless, and therefore, you have no eitzah but to do one of the two aforementioned eitzahs, which is to eat it with the chatichas pas, okay, the patim and vadois, and latzeis the day sake. But as we said, the chazanish, the latziyain, and the nihug of Shlomo Salman Auerbach is to make a bracha. When I was growing up, that's what we did. We made a bracha on Kinduch Suda. Not the same necessarily from the Zionist. That's a whole different issue, which we have to discuss separately.
Is it fair to say that whenever you serve at a Shabbos party, that you should make a bracha on at the end of the Shabbos meal?
Basically, nicht. I don't know what a Shabbos party is. What's a Shabbos party?
Grandchildren. Simple to the Shabbos party.
I'm not sure. It's been a while since I've been serving Shabbos parties, so I don't know. Okay, anyway, so the possibility of the Chazara is that it became part of the lifta. Now, if you look at the problem with this is the Chofetz Chaim himself in the Shartzin Bavarns. Let's go back to the Shartzin. He himself rejects this svara. And that's the problem with this shtickle Torah here. Look back to the Shartzin. He says, "Va'apim mekaymais shenagu lechol peris mevulim mevushalim b'chol suda v'suda." Go back to the Shartzin, all in the beginning. There you go. First line. Gam came established like Shiva the Rambam. Where there you go. Isn't that what the svara that they're all telling you? What Rabbi Gottesman is telling you? And the Mishnah says that does not make it part of a Suda. It still blives a Suda shall call Parim Rakinochem Ba. He said clearly the Svarna rejects it. Why with the Chaim Chayzer? So Rabbi Lindinsky said that he heard from Rabbi Felder, one of the Chashuv Pesachim Mismaj Kavaya. The Chaim, he says Chaim was only Chayzer from what he said that the derech la'iflai doesn't help. He goes, if the derech, you don't need to actually make a brach on it. And therefore, when in Sharet Sin, where he says the chayiv v'filu im derech la'iflai, he says mistavra l'chayra. He says, look at the lashon here. It says mistavra l'chayra is not clear. Since it was not clear, mistavra l'chayra, because nagu, which is a derech, to eat it, mistavra l'chayra still obliges kinuach, which is the kinuach controls. But he's not 100% a bar, and that's why he felt it that way. And Sefer Minchas Ish says he heard from Chaim that as an Ish tried to explain the mystery here. I mentioned to you earlier, it's now 12:50, so I need 10 minutes to do the two things we left open. So let me conclude with this. The mystery here was that the Chazon Ish writes, Nissen Karelitz, his nephew, writes, and Chaim writes, Ein Nachem, which means not that they disagreed with it, his svara. They had a svara in the Commission Brewer's Chazara. As I said earlier, I think in the first part, the Chazon Ish treated the Mishnah Berurah like no other achron, with incredible deference. So then, Sefer Minchas Ish, they bring a pshat that they heard from Reb Chaim. What was the pshat here with the Chofetz Chaim Chazara? He says, and this goes to show you how Pashuv Unzer Chabur is, because the Elam brought this up earlier. Chofetz Chaim was rogel to eat Compote that was simis. And that's why, please forgive me on this, the Chofetz Chaim makes big simis about the simis. He mentions, come on, I don't get a smile out of that. He mentions the simis 3 times. 3 times. And it's clear, says Reb Chaim, that because the Chofetz Chaim had a personal affinity to tzimis. In those days, the derech was that they ate tzimis when it was part of the Svia practice. But you can also take the tzimis, they ate it hot then, eat it cold, and it would be kinuach suda. As the Olam said, same food can be eaten 2 different brachas. And the Sharet Tzion, in the Sharet Tzion, he writes, if this is, he makes a big tzimis about the tzimis that you're staring at, right in front of you, the tzimis, Shekar tzimis the last 2 times, Efsher, maybe it's merin, and it's your potter. So the Mishnah Berurah with the stopik, if Compote is like tzimis, which is masbia, or it's like Compote, which is kinuach, which is not. So he says, he raised this stuff already in the Sharet Tzion, and he was chayzer by because in the beginning, with Tchilas Yamav, he made a brach on it, because he felt that the ikar of this peiros, which may have been new food at the time, not sure, was kinuach masika. And then the Seif Yamav, he was chayshish that maybe the food was le'azbiyah, and therefore it's part of the Suda, and therefore he was not mevarach olav. That accounts for the Mishnah Berurah's not chazara. The Mishnah Berurah's suffix. It wasn't chayzer. Then you can toss out the whole Sefer Mishnah Berurah, you would make chazaras. He was mesupik and he was chayshish for this nihud. And that's why his action was different than what he wrote. In our Compote, says the Chazon Ish, which is made from Paris, which is somehow not similar to the exact simis, there the Mishnah Berurah clearly would agree, Yechaya Bracha, because Vadai, it's not a chelik of the Siyah. And therefore, it is not that he was chayzer. It was that the Metzias may have changed. And therefore the Chazon Ish was the Mishnah Berurah was chayshish for that Metzias changing, and therefor in his Me'ikar Adin, you got to make a bracha. But he was chayshish to it, and therefore he didn't make the bracha. Now, did he eat it with bread? That doesn't say. Rav Moshe, as we said, made a bracha. Rav Moshe was nistapik in this too. And therefore, Rav Moshe ate all desserts with bread. And now you'll ask me, and now let's get to the last issue here. How do you eat it with bread? Rav Moshe used to take a piece of bread and he would eat a little bit from the beginning of dessert till the end. He took a piece of bread and I'd take off small pieces. And I don't know if with every spoon exactly, this face of shenish, it's only brought in these Svarim Klisheni, and they don't specify it exactly. He didn't write it himself. But the point here is, it does not help to go to the Shaila here. This is a machlekes in the Paiskim, goes all the way back to the Rishonim, of whether or not eating pas at the beginning and pas at the end is kailo everything. That's a machlekes. It's brought in the Tur. It's brought in the Beis Yosef. It's a machlekes Rishonim and Rabbi Yerucham. It's brought in the Shulchan Aruch, and the Shulchan Aruch says the end of Sif Aleph and Tchilas Achal Aperis and Pas Ubesaif, and he ate it b'lei Pas, then you don't need a bracha. And the Mishnah Berurah explains, and the Bir Allah is Meir Chana, and we saw it. So it doesn't help to eat the Pas before and after, and therefore you have to eat the Pas with the dessert. What does with mean? The Ma'aser Rav that's brought from Rav Moshe is that he ate it all the way through the dessert. The only time that pas helps is where the ikar is lalafis by a pas. But once it becomes kinuach, you have to attach somehow the pas to the suda. The Chalkas Yaakov, the Rav in Zurich, who was a Belzer Chusid, he starts his tshuva here. He says, you can take a look at it here. It's 2 lines. B'cholzem mashavin ma'at peris mevashal and knuch sodnik Compote. U'begliles bells haminig lefi diyosi kach. Top upper left column of Chalkas Yaakov page Ayin. He says in bells the Chalkas Yaakov of Rabbi was a bells chusid. I mention this every time I go to see a Rim Solveitchik. I tell him this. Anybody know why?
Sure.
His wife, his name is Brush. Yeah. He married Chassid. He says, Beglila's bells, Aminig Lefi Yossi Kach, top left. Besudas Leil Shabbos, Haya Eichlan on Compote and Paskadei Lepoitra Bibracha. Besudas Shabbos Shachar, say Mevarchem Bracha, Aroy Leila Compote. Why? So he gives this fascinating, what's the difference between the night and the day? The Ganira Hasibuch, Admira Bells will be Talmid Chama, and Medagding Shloilechel, Besudas Shabbos Rak, Arba Tavshilin. Only 4. I don't know, Pikabal or whatever. Uba Arba say Compote, Echel Arba Tavshilin. Similar to the Chofetz Chaim Svar. Abu Babaker, Achla Abar Mishal Besuda Belia Compote. And the Compote was not part of the Suda, and therefore they made a Bracha Aruyalai. Kaimenu Beretz Palanya, Shaloya Minikain, Lachel Kabot B'Maisachel Suda, Kindamani Kisha Eichan Besuda Compote Eichan Bracha Aruyalai L'Ad B'Shach Shabbos. And then he says it depends, and he goes on to discuss various places, various minhagim. So contemporary Sfarim will say Ladina that if somebody is not ragel to eat Compote in the Sefer the Suda, even Shabbos and Smachos, Avada, in such a case, you need to make a bracha, and the fact that the Mishnah Berurah controls. Someone who's hamid ragel achol Compote b'seicha Suda, make a redin, you still have to make a bracha because it's still called a kinuach. The Mishnah Berurah still controls. However, just as the Mishnah Berurah was chaysh in his personal need, maybe not, maybe somehow for the various svaras that we discussed, it becomes part of the Suda. Then you either take the pre-chai. You want to be a medadik mitzvahs, or you do it like a Moshe did. You take a piece of bread and you have to eat it all the way through, which is not a simple thing to do, and I don't know if they're so makbid on this. Now, what about glida? Just to close here, because Rabbi asked me this kasha. So in the Shalom Nissen brings this is a not so simple at all. Glida happens to be a big machlekes discussion in the Paiskim, but here he brings Hine calls is ice cream kinuach? I don't know. Seems to me that ices are kinuach. Because what are ices? Ices are cold Paris, right? Not really just really sugar water. But they serve you lemon or cherry ices, so they're making believe that it's Paris. So why isn't it kinuach? But he says, eichel glida, which is ice cream, shamati midoidi agarn of Gershon Lapian. I guess that's the Blade's son. Sheshama me'agarn of Moshe Feinstein. The aim sarach levarach halav to have a mashke. And just like pater is all mashkim, glida is mashkim. Look on it's in the Shalom Nissen in the upper left. Said Shalom Nissen, you're this is the end. This is Rabbi. Back to the Shalom Nissen. There you go. The reason why you don't make a bracha because it's balishrei samichel. You're soaking it to make it more edible. Or misham shein l'chiyuv leishtia. The svaris ilu leishaykas klapik glida. They ain't stam din mashke anytime bracha seichet suda. And therefore, from Zalman says the glida baliknuach. Everybody holds you have to make a bracha on the glida, and I don't know if anyone is makbid on this, which will come out that ices for kinuach you have to make a shakel. Anyone eats ices without making a shakel, and ice cream you have to make a shakel, and if the element is makbid on this, and therefore we'll have to see what the psak halacha here is, because it's a big shaila here in the contemporary paiskim, and a lot of it depends on on whether you include to make a bracha on yain saraf. Schnapps, they used to eat schnapps, drink schnapps for kinuach purposes. People today still do it after the fish. And that's a discussion of the paiskim. That will be discussed in the course of the week. Summary. Okay, Rabbi Sai, summary. It's 101, so I'll do this in a minute. 5 shittas in the Rishonim. Taka the Mishabura, you need to make a bracha on Compote. Backed up in the Sharet Sion. Second, Bershon Zalman asks a kasha on the Mishabura, why is not Teicha Suda dependent on Rabbeinu Yaina and Inshallah? Kasha and Bershon Zalman doesn't seem to say that in the Rabbeinu Yaina and Inshallah. From Zalman, Achain made a bracha. Pazanish made a bracha. Stiper made a bracha. Kasha seems to be theorists and stories that we had in the Chofetz Chaim was putatively chazer by that he wrote. You have to make a bracha Compote. And the question is, why possibly are they accurate? Why possibly was the Mishabura chazer by? So we had 3 stories brought in different forms, different edus. The Chofetz Chaim changed his niyug. The base Karelis Kanievsky deny this, and they explained that Chofetz Chaim didn't change his niyug. Personally, he was choishish that maybe Compote is a part of the meal. You want to buy because of this far that Rabbi Gurwitz said that it changed. Eastern Europe, Poland changed in the 20 years, the last 20 years of the 1800s. Whatever the reason is, Chofetz Chaim felt that you have to be choishish that maybe it is part of the Suda, and therefore he himself didn't make a bracha. So what do? 2 H's are Paris Chaim, Pas. Talked a little bit about the details of how you eat the pas and other things we will discuss in the course of the week. Yasha Kai Chacham, Rabbi Lindinsky will be here tomorrow to discuss all sorts of halacha l'maisa and dvar ma'boy m'tayich ha'suda. Yasha Kai Chacham, thank you for listening. Tonight, 7 o'clock, it will be our usual halacha chumash here. Everybody's invited. Thank you.